I threw myself into the sea out of despair. Unexpectedly, I returned to the 5th year after I became mates with Alpha Ethan Grant. Ethan is my mate. He is the strongest alpha among all the packs. Our son Chester Grant inherited his bloodline. Like Ethan, he is a powerful, unyielding born leader. To the world, I am the noble Luna. I am the one every she-wolf envies and strives to be. Yet the first thing I did was venture deep into the forest where a witch lived. I asked the witch for a bone ring that would sever the blood bond with Ethan and Chester. Wear this, and the bond between you and your mate and child will gradually sever within 5 days. The process is painful and irreversible. You mustn't regret it, the witch says. I immediately place the pale bone ring on my finger. While enduring the pain that pierces directly into my soul, I reply while trembling, I will never regret it. Ethan's first love is Angelina Lark. In my previous life, Ethan permitted her to dethrone me from my Luna position. I was also injured in the process. Additionally, Chester complained that my scent was repulsive and called Angelina mommy. So in this life I don't want my mate or my son. I just want the freedom to live my own life. But after leaving, I hear that the strongest alpha and his heir are searching the world with soldiers in tow. They swear to find the Luna, who had taken their hearts. The dark room was thick with the scent of herbs and dust. A white-haired witch placed an ancient-looking bone ring in front of me. You know the price of this thing, don't you? Once you wear it, the bond between mates will be severed gradually over 5 days. However, the process is painful. You'll feel as though your heart is being ripped out while still alive. The process is also irreversible, the witch warned. Her clouded eyes were filled with obvious contempt as they swept over me. You naive fools always end up crying on your knees at my feet, begging me to take the ring off. You won't be any different. Are you sure you want to buy it? The witch added. I felt a phantom ache in my chest at her words. Still, I simply took a deep breath and handed over the locked case of cash I had prepared in advance. It held all of my savings. I'm sure, I answered. The witch snorted derisively. Then, she tossed the bone ring to me with careless ease. Just as I was about to step out the door, she called after me. You have 24 hours to change your mind. Don't say I didn't warn you. With the bone ring clutched tightly in my hand, I returned to the home I shared with my mate Ethan Grant. When I opened the door, the villa was unexpectedly lively. The living room was decorated with pink balloons and streamers, like something out of a dream. Cake and exquisite dishes were laid out on a long table. Every detail spoke of care and thoughtfulness. Against my will, my heart skipped a beat. Did Ethan remember what today meant? It was our 5th anniversary of becoming mates. Yet in the very next second, my delusion was shattered entirely. Right there, in the center of the living room, hung a banner that read Happy Birthday, Angelina. I froze in place, feeling as though someone had punched me hard in the gut. Light footsteps came from upstairs. My son Chester Grant looked princely in his children's tuxedo. He came bounding down the stairs, only to bypass me entirely and throw himself into the arms of Ethan's first love, Angelina Lark. Happy birthday, Angie, he said enthusiastically. Angelina smiled tenderly at Chester and bent down to his forehead. Then, she looked up and saw me standing at the door. The glint of disdain that flashed across her eyes pierced straight through me. Luna, you're back. It's my birthday today. I forgot to let you know in advance. I hope you're not mad, she said with a fake smile. I took a deep breath and calmly replied, but I remember your birthday isn't actually today. Angelina's birthday was on a round-numbered date. Chester used to chatter about it all the time, so I couldn't possibly have gotten it wrong. Angelina's smile froze for a split second, and then grew even sweeter. She replied, Your memory is impressive, Luna. You even remembered my birthday. Alpha Ethan bought me a new villa today. Since we wanted to celebrate this occasion, I figured I may as well move my birthday celebration earlier to today too. Alpha Ethan's been planning this party since early this morning. Angelina's every word felt like a knife to my heart. Just then, Ethan walked out of the study. The first thing he saw was Angelina and Chester. The usual sternness between his brows melted instantly into tenderness. A smile even appeared on his lips. It had been a long time since I had seen it. But the moment Ethan's gaze landed on me, that smile vanished. With a frown, he spat coldly. "What are you doing here?" His one sentence left me feeling so humiliated that I wanted to disappear. All of Ethan's careful party preparations had nothing to do with me. He was even questioning why I was here. Just then, Ethan took out a velvet box from his pocket and handed it to Angelina. In a sincere tone, he said, "I prepared this birthday gift for you a long time ago. Happy birthday." Ethan opened the box. Inside was a diamond necklace that sparkled brilliantly under the light. "Wow. It's so pretty. It goes perfectly with the diamond hairpin I gave you," Chester exclaimed with a spark in his eyes. Then he personally helped fasten the necklace around Angelina's neck. Angelina was so moved that her eyes filled with tears. The entire scene looked like a joyful family of three. Suddenly, Ethan turned to me and asked, "What about you? What present did you prepare for Angelina?" My throat tightened. Cold sweat pooled in my palms. I had spent all of my savings on the bone ring in my pocket. So, of course, I couldn't possibly have prepared anything for Angelina. After a brief silence, I could only shake my head. "Nothing," I answered. The air turned sharply still. Ethan's brows knotted tightly. A flicker of disappointment and disgust flashed across his eyes. "You didn't even prepare the most basic gesture? What exactly do you take yourself for? Do you still think you deserve to be called Luna?" he criticized. Even Chester pouted and murmured, "How could you, Mommy? Angie's so good to me, and you didn't even give her a present." Angelina, pretending to be distressed, clutched her chest and shook her head. "Don't be like this, boys. It's not Luna Tori's fault. Maybe she just forgot." However, she couldn't hide the triumphant glint in her eyes. Like fire, it burned at my pride. I heard myself hoarsely say, "I'm sorry. I'll head back to my room so that I won't bother you all anymore." I turned and went upstairs. The moment I shut the door behind me, tears welled in my eyes, but I forced them down. I slowly took out the bone ring. Then I shoved it hard onto my finger. A bone-deep pain instantly tore through my body. I let out a muffled gasp and collapsed onto the cold floor. Cold sweat drenched my back in seconds. I felt as though my soul was being torn apart. Yet, compared to the heartbreak from just moments ago, this pain felt much milder. With my gaze locked on the bone ring, I whispered to myself, "Just 5 more days, Tori Dawson. 5 more days, and you'll be free from this ridiculous farce." The pain from the bone ring severing the bond was excruciating. It was so overwhelming that I passed out. By the time I opened my eyes again, it was already noon the next day. I pushed my sore, weak body out of bed and got ready to head downstairs to grab a bite. However, the sight in the living room made me freeze. The once luxurious and spotless villa was now in complete disarray. It was also eerily silent, as though all signs of life had been wiped away. Yesterday's cake and leftover food still littered the table, while the balloons and streamers lay scattered on the floor. It was as if the lively celebration had never happened. Only desolation remained. Instinctively, I called out for the servants a few times, but no one answered. Typically, they should have already been cleaning at this hour. A chill I couldn't explain crept into my heart. After hurrying to the study, I saw its door wide open, and it was completely empty inside. Chester's room was the same way too. His neatly arranged clothes and the toys he would leave around carelessly were all gone. With trembling hands, I dialed Ethan's number. The phone rang for a long time before it was finally answered. I could hear noise in the background along with the faint sound of Chester's and Angelina's laughter. "What is it?" Ethan asked. His voice held a trace of irritation, as though my call was an unwelcome intrusion. I gripped the phone tightly and used every ounce of strength I had to keep my voice steady. "Where are you?" "We moved," he answered casually. "Angelina likes the villa by Silvermoon Lake. The environment here is nicer, and it's better for Chester too. We shifted here first thing this morning." My voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell me?" There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Then Ethan explained in a matter-of-fact tone. "Weren't you sleeping really soundly yesterday? You looked exhausted, so we didn't wake you. Besides, it's not like you had anything to do. Just take a cab and come over yourself." Before I could respond, he abruptly hung up. My phone clattered to the floor. I stood there in a daze, feeling as though the floor beneath me had vanished and was unable to hold me up anymore. They were gone. They moved, and not a single one of them told me about it. After 5 years, I thought I had long grown used to Ethan's indifference and coldness. But I never imagined he could go this far. I went back to my room, opened my suitcase, and began to pack my things. Just then my phone rang again. It was Ethan. Why aren't you here yet? Chester's whining for the pancakes you make. Hurry up and come make them for him, he demanded. Ethan's tone was as casual as ever. It was as though I hadn't been left behind, and was just naturally expected to obey whenever called. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Fine. I was leaving anyway, so this would be the last time. Send me the address, I said quietly. After following the address Ethan sent, I took a cab to the new villa by Silvermoon Lake. When I opened the door, the first thing I saw was the 3 pairs of neatly arranged slippers in the entryway. Placed side by side were a pair of pink women's slippers, a pair of blue men's slippers, and a tiny pair of children's slippers. The shoe cabinet was full. There was no space left for me. A brand new family portrait hung on the living room wall. Ethan, Chester, and Angelina were all smiling brightly in the photo. I wasn't in it. The air held traces of Angelina's usual perfume. Her cashmere shawl was draped over the sofa. On the coffee table was a fashion magazine, laid open to where she had left off reading it. Every inch of this place carried traces of Angelina. It felt warm and harmonious. I stood at the doorway quietly, taking it all in. It was as though I had walked into a world that had absolutely nothing to do with me. My appearance brought the lively atmosphere in the living room to an abrupt halt. Angelina immediately walked over to me. With a perfectly measured smile, she said, "Luna, you're here. Come in, just treat it like your own home. They've been making a fuss all morning about wanting to eat your pancakes. I really need to learn how to make them from you." I didn't respond. I simply walked past Angelina and headed for the kitchen. Her smile faltered for a moment. Then she turned to Ethan, looking slightly aggrieved. "Did I say something wrong, Alpha?" "Luna Tori, she doesn't seem to like me very much. I just want to get along with her," Angelina whined. Ethan's expression changed instantly. His once gentle features turned cold, and his gaze fell on me like ice. I lowered my eyes and said nothing. In these 5 years, I had lived through this scene too many times to count. Angelina gently leaned against his side and softly added, "Chester still loves his mommy's cooking. I could never measure up to her." The word mommy felt like a deliberate reminder of who no longer deserved to be called that. When Angelina followed me into the kitchen, the sweetness on her face vanished completely. It was replaced by undisguised smugness. "Don't waste your energy, Tori. Ethan is mine now. Did you know? Chester's already calling me mommy in private, and even says I'm gentler than you. But what can I do? I can't push away such an adorable pup, right? This home needs a she-wolf to run it. Since you can't handle that role, someone has to step in," she bragged. I simply answered coolly, "Don't worry. I'll be out of your way soon enough." Angelina thought I was bluffing, and her smile turned even colder. "Don't flatter yourself, Tori. You really think that kind of talk will rattle me? You can't live without Ethan, and you're even more reluctant to give up Chester. So who are you trying to fool with this act?" she shot back. With that, Angelina suddenly grabbed my hand and tried to press it against the boiling kettle. When I felt the scalding steam against my skin, I instinctively struggled. The kettle tipped over, but instead of backing away, Angelina thrusted her own hand toward it. Angelina's sharp, piercing scream tore through the air. Ethan rushed in the moment he heard it. His first instinct was to grab her wrist in alarm. When he saw the glaring red bun on Angelina's skin, he immediately frowned. Ethan turned to me and questioned, "What happened?" "It wasn't me," I started instinctively. But before I could finish, Angelina cut in. "Don't blame Luna Tori, Alpha. She probably didn't mean it. She just accidentally knocked over the kettle." Angelina's feigned victim act, disguised as graciousness, only added fuel to the fire. At that moment, Ethan's gaze suddenly shifted to my hand. Under the kitchen light, the bone rings pale, ghostly glow seemed jarringly out of place. His expression tensed sharply. That ring on your finger. Where did you get it? My heart skipped a beat, and I unconsciously clenched my fingers. Pretending to be calm, I hid my hand behind my back and casually answered, "It's just some old thing." I didn't elaborate, and Ethan didn't press further. However, the chill in his gaze deepened, like he was looking at someone he no longer recognized. Just then, Chester also ran into the kitchen, drawn by the sound of Angelina's scream. When he saw the burn on her hand while I stood to the side, he immediately burst into tears. "You're a bad mommy. You hurt Angie. I hate you. I want Angelina to be my mommy," he yelled at me. In that instant, I couldn't even breathe. Ethan was looking at me, but his gaze held no tenderness anymore. All that was left was heavy, bitter disappointment. "It's been 5 years, Tori. I thought you would have learned to carry yourself with dignity by now," he criticized. I kept my mouth shut and no longer tried to explain, because I knew that no one here would believe me. Calmly, I untied my apron and gently touched my own scalded hand. It had also gotten burned in the chaos. Then, I turned and silently left the villa. The pain in my hand felt sharp and searing. Still, it paled in comparison to the pain in my heart. I had dedicated 5 years to Ethan and Chester. Yet, all I received in return was my husband's cold dismissal and my son's rejection. I looked down at the bone ring on my 4th finger. Just 4 more days, and all of this would be over. After leaving the villa, I returned to the place Ethan, Chester, and I used to live. It was completely empty now. Just as well, I welcomed the silence. In the few days that remained, I just waited quietly for the bone ring to finish its work and break the mate bond between Ethan and me once and for all. The final day came. That afternoon, I received a call from Ethan. His tone, as always, was commanding. "Go pick up Chester from school." "I'm tied up," he ordered. Chester was still my biological pup. Hence, I couldn't bring myself to leave him alone or let him face danger. I arrived at Chester's school early. They seemed to be holding an art exhibition. The hallway walls were lined with childlike, but heartfelt drawings. I wandered casually until one drawing suddenly stopped me cold. The title read "My Lovely Family," and the artist's signature was Chester Grant. In the drawing, Ethan, Angelina, and Chester sat closely together. They all had bright smiles on their faces. Meanwhile, I stood behind the trio wearing an apron. I had my head bowed as I cleaned. Chester had drawn me as just a faceless, blurry shadow. I had thought my heart had gone numb, but it began to ache again with each throb. Just then, the school bell rang, signaling the end of the school day. Children came pouring out through the school gates. Chester spotted me immediately, but there was no shred of joy on his face. Instead, he seemed slightly displeased. "Where's Daddy and Angie?" he asked with a frown. I calmly answered, "They couldn't make it." He pointed to a snack stand near the gate. "I want that one. Go buy it for me." Stunned, I reached into my pocket. Only then did I remember that I had no money left. "I can't buy it." "I didn't bring any cash," I replied honestly. A few pups passing by snickered and jeered. What a poor thing. Even his mom won't buy him snacks. Chester's face turned red on the spot. He felt I was embarrassing him. The next second, he shoved me hard from behind. Caught completely off guard, I stumbled forward and crashed to the ground. My palms scraped harshly against the pavement, and blood flowed from the torn skin. A car drove right by me, narrowly running over my outstretched hand. With a finger pointed at me, Chester shouted. With all his might. His voice was shrill and filled with hatred. "Who told you to come get me? I don't want a useless mom like you. Can you just get lost already?" Those in the crowd who recognized me began whispering to each other. "Isn't that Luna Tori? Even her own kid hates her?" Tizzy. It's no wonder Alpha Ethan is giving her the cold shoulder. What a disgrace. These voices rose like a tide. Bit by bit, they pushed me toward the abyss. I stared at Chester, whose small face was twisted in disgust. I felt as though my heart was being carved into with a blunt knife. In that moment, I reached the limit of my endurance and humiliation. Just then, a sharp car horn pierced through the noise, silencing the crowd. A sleek black car sped toward the school gates, coming to a smooth stop right outside them. Ethan stepped out from the back seat and swept his gaze over the gathered onlookers. He hadn't done anything. Yet somehow the chatter died instantly. When Ethan turned his gaze to me, his eyes were filled with condescending scrutiny and displeasure. Making a scene in front of the school? What kind of Luna behaves like this, Tori? He criticized. I stared at him, stunned. Then, I abruptly burst into laughter. In that case, I'll give this position to someone who truly deserves it, I retorted. I gently touched the bone ring on my fourth finger. In the next second, it emitted a blinding white light, like a dying star burning itself out. An unseen force inserted itself between us. It tore our bond apart with brutal finality. Before my eyes, I saw fragments of memories I shared with Ethan. Our heart-fluttering first meeting, the vows we made during the mating ceremony, the years of grievances and endurance, all of it shattered into ashes and dispersed into the wind. From this moment on, we no longer have anything to do with each other, I declared. Tori, Ethan choked out. He clutched his chest in disbelief. His eyes were locked on me and filled with horror. Ethan could feel that the mate bond between us had vanished. The pain of having his soul torn apart almost caused Ethan to collapse on the spot. He could feel his wolf howling in agony. While clutching his chest tightly, Ethan was gasping violently for breath. Cold sweat dripped from his forehead. But he was after all an alpha. After only a moment of losing control, Ethan forcibly suppressed the pain that had pierced deep into his very bones. His face had also gone pale from the pain. Despite this, he donned his usual glacial expression as he slowly straightened up. Ethan stared at me in disbelief. His gaze shifted from horror to scrutiny. Our mate bond is broken, he said. His voice was hoarse. Ethan narrowed his eyes at me and asked, Is this your doing? I met his gaze and calmly answered, Yes. The final trace of warmth vanished from Ethan's gaze. It was replaced with a seething rage that was born from being betrayed and provoked. Yet he laughed. It sounded cold and sharp. Fine. Very well. Since you're leaving, don't ever come back, he stated. Chester, who had been stunned into a daze, finally snapped back to his senses. He didn't understand what a mate bond was. He only knew that, once again, I had made Ethan angry. Chester immediately ran to Ethan's side. Hugging his leg, he shouted at me, I don't want you to be my mommy. Go away. Never come back. I looked at the father and son duo, who were united in hostility toward a common enemy, and felt absolutely nothing. I didn't say another word. I just looked at them one last time. Then I turned and walked away. From behind me, I could hear the crowds murmuring and my son's childish insults. However, none of it had anything to do with me anymore. After I left, Chester was in high spirits for days. I had always made him do his homework and never let him eat junk food. But now I was gone. Only the gentle and beautiful Angelina was left at home. Because of this, Chester felt as though his happy life was finally beginning. One afternoon, Angelina was sitting on the couch in an expensive dress. Chester, like a little attendant, eagerly brought over a plate of freshly cut apples. Have some apples, Angie, he offered. Chester had expected to be praised, just like always. However, his foot caught on the carpet, and he stumbled forward. The plate of apple slices, along with its sticky juices, flew straight onto Angelina's dress. Angelina let out a shriek and shot to her feet. As she stared at the stains on her dress, her usual gentle and patient expression was gone. Instead, it had been replaced by one that was twisted with disgust and fury. Are you blind, Chester? Angelina snapped. Her voice was ear-piercingly shrill. This is my favorite dress. I just put it on today, and now you've ruined it. Chester was so shocked that he froze where he stood. His eyes instantly welled with tears. He had never seen Angelina like this. To his memory, she had always been gentle and smiling. I'm sorry, Angie. It was an accident, he explained in a small, hurt voice. However, Angelina scolded him with a contemptuous expression. Get lost. She shoved Chester to the floor, and didn't even spare him a second glance as he tumbled to the floor. She only fussed over her ruined dress, her face etched with a look of distress. Chester was utterly stunned. He stared at the unfamiliar woman before him, and for the first time, hurt and fear flooded him all at once. He realized that Angelina was actually this fierce. Meanwhile, in the PAX conference hall, Ethan was tugging at his tie in frustration. The searing pain in his chest had passed. However, a constant, hollow emptiness had taken its place. Ethan felt as though someone had carved out a piece of his heart. He couldn't focus on his paperwork. Additionally, everything looked wrong, and even breathing felt tedious to him. Ethan blamed all of this on his recent poor condition. He also forced himself to believe that his current state had nothing to do with the departure of the ungrateful me. He just needed a bit more time to adjust. After leaving Ethan, I opened a small apothecary in neutral territory. The front courtyard was for selling herbs. Meanwhile, the backyard, where I grew all kinds of herbs and plants, became my home. Here, no one knew I had once been a Luna. They only knew me as a healer named Tori Dawson. The townsfolk were simple and kind. My neighbor ran a bakery. Every morning, she would bring me fresh baked bread. I would return the favor by giving her herbs that soothed the mind and helped with sleep. Without all the suffocating entanglements of the past, I had regained peace within myself. I had even learned how to smile from the heart again. That morning, like always, I opened the shop door. Sunlight poured onto me. I took a deep breath. The air was filled with the fresh scent of grass and earth. This was the scent of freedom. Meanwhile, miles away inside Ethan's villa, the atmosphere was suffocating. Ethan, seated at the dining table with an emotionless expression, was staring at the third cup of coffee that had been placed before him. My coffee is either too strong or too weak. Can no one make a decent cup of coffee anymore? He complained. The cup created a harsh sound when he slammed it onto the table. The maid beside him trembled in fear. Angelina hurried forward and tried to soothe him with a gentle voice. Don't be upset, Ethan. I'll make another cup for you. She fumbled clumsily in front of the coffee machine, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't make the coffee the way Ethan liked it. Ever since I left, everything in the villa had fallen into disarray. The dress shirts Ethan usually wore were always wrinkled, the books he liked to read in the study were also never in their usual place, and even the coffee he drank no longer tasted the same. When I had been around, Ethan never cared about these details. But once I had left, everything about his life felt off, and it drove him crazy. Angelina brought the freshly brewed coffee to Ethan, and carefully watched his expression. Ethan only took a sip before pushing it away with a frown. Then he stood up and left the villa, claiming that he needed to handle some pack matters. His reaction hit Angelina hard. She spent the entire day feeling downcast and dejected. That evening, Chester refused to eat because the food didn't suit his taste. This caused Angelina's pent-up anger to finally explode. She snatched the toy from Chester's hands and scolded him harshly. All you do is cry. If you won't eat, then never eat again. Startled by her outburst, Chester's crying grew louder. Mommy, I want my mommy. Angelina poked Chester's forehead viciously. Well, your mother doesn't want you anymore. From now on, I'm your mommy. If you dare cry again, I'll lock you in the basement's little dark room. Angelina's words terrified Chester, and he abruptly stopped crying. He only dared to sniffle softly while staring at the vicious woman before him in fear. Upon seeing that he had quieted down, Angelina snorted in satisfaction. Then, she turned around and slammed the door behind her as she returned to her room. In the midst of fear and hunger, Chester longed for me for the first time. He missed the sweet pancakes I made and the bedtime stories I told. He missed the mother he had sent away with his own hands. Another month had passed, and all traces of my existence seemed to have been deliberately erased. The villa was filled with things Angelina liked. These items were luxurious, but cold. They didn't have a hint of the feeling of a warm home. Ethan still buried himself in endless work, using it to numb himself. However, every day he returned to the villa later and later. Meanwhile, Chester had become increasingly quiet and taciturn. The arrogance and carefree smile he once wore had completely vanished. One day, Ethan came home earlier than usual. Out of habit, he walked toward the study. However, as he passed Chester's room, he heard faint sobbing coming from inside. Frowning, Ethan pushed open the door only to find Chester sitting on the carpet. Chester was clumsily applying medicine to a wound on his arm. Tears were streaming down his face. Yet he didn't dare cry out loud. His small arm was covered in dark bruises, and new wounds covered old ones. It was shocking to look at. Ethan was momentarily stunned. Then uncontrollable fury surged from deep within him. "Who did this?" he demanded. Chester was trembling from fear. As he frantically tried to cover up his injuries with his sleeve, he stammered, "I fell. It was an accident." Ethan walked up to Chester. As he towered over him, Ethan commanded, "Look at me." Chester was forced to raise his head, meeting the eyes of his father, who saw through everything. He didn't dare lie. "It was Angie," Chester admitted, finally bursting into tears. He then told Ethan all the fear and grievances he had been experiencing over the past 2 months. "She said I spilled food on the table, and that I wasn't well behaved then. She pinched me and didn't let me tell you." Ethan didn't say a word. He just stood there listening in silence. However, his breathing grew heavier and heavier. The air in the room seemed to thicken. Ethan helped Chester finish dressing his wounds. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out of the room. He pushed open the partially open door to Angelina's room. Inside, she was standing in front of the mirror and trying on the diamond necklace Ethan had given her. When she saw him enter, her face immediately broke into a sweet smile, and she quickly walked over to him. "Why are you home so early today, Alpha?" Angelina asked. Ethan didn't answer her. Instead, he looked at her with an icy gaze. "I asked you to move in to take care of Chester, and this is how you do it?" he questioned. Angelina's smile faltered. Panic rose in her chest, but she quickly regained her composure and tried to defend herself. "Did Chester throw a tantrum again, and come complaining to you? How could you trust the words of a child? Get out." Ethan might have only uttered 2 words, but his voice carried suppressed fury. Angelina was now thoroughly panicking. She grabbed his arm, crying as she begged, "Please let me explain, Alpha. I didn't mean to hurt him. I just wanted to discipline him properly." "I don't want to repeat myself," Ethan stated. As he shook off her hand, his eyes were filled with apparent contempt. He called for the servants. While ignoring Angelina's cries and pleas, he immediately had everything she owned thrown out of the villa. When the villa was finally quiet again, the emptiness that Ethan had been forcibly suppressing for over a month engulfed him like a rising tide. He looked around the spacious, opulent villa. Every corner still seemed to hold a trace of my presence, but he had driven me away with his own hands. For the first time, he had to admit that he had messed things up. After pulling out his phone, he dialed his beta's number. When Ethan spoke, his voice was hoarse and laced with a tinge of exhaustion. "Fine, Tori. Use everything at your disposal to bring her back." When Ethan's beta, Derek Scott, found me, I was in the backyard trimming a thriving medicinal herb. The sun was very warm that afternoon, and the air was filled with a faint scent of herbs. Everything was peaceful and wonderful. Derek's arrival was like a stone thrown into a still pond. As Ethan's most trusted right-hand man, he was always composed and efficient. But now, as he took me in, there was an unconcealed hint of surprise and complexity in his eyes. Derek had probably expected a Luna who had left her Alpha to wither away. He probably had never imagined that she would thrive even more vibrantly instead. "Luna Tori, Alpha Ethan wishes for you to come back," he stated in a respectful tone. He still addressed me by my old title. After setting my shears down, I dusted the dirt off my hands. Then I looked calmly at him and said, "I am no longer Luna." Derek was taken aback for a moment. Then he softly urged, "Alpha Ethan has already kicked Angelina out. Chester also misses you very much." "Really?" I replied coolly. Yet inside, I felt no stir of emotion. 2 months ago, Ethan and Chester were the ones who had driven me away. Now they were also the ones claiming they missed me. I shook my head. "Go back. Tell Ethan we're done. I won't return." Derek looked as though he wanted to say more. However, upon seeing how resolute I was, he could only sigh and helplessly leave. I thought that would be the end of it, but the next afternoon, someone I least wanted to see appeared at the door of my shop. Ethan was here, and he had brought Chester. Ethan was wearing a sharp black suit. His powerful alpha presence clashed with this tranquil place. By just standing there, he was drawing the attention of passers-by. As he surveyed my small shop, he unconsciously frowned. His gaze was tinged with disdain. Your tantrum has gone on long enough, Tori. Come home with me, Ethan said. His tone was stiff, and his words sounded more like a command than a request. Chester peeked out from behind Ethan. Yeah, hurry up and come back with us. I've forgiven you, Chester added. I looked at the father-son duo in front of me, who still carried that same air of superiority. Suddenly, I found the whole scene comical. Ethan and Chester had probably thought that kicking Angelina out was some grand gesture, a favor they had bestowed upon me. They probably also assumed that their mere presence here would prompt me to return to them with gratitude. You're not welcome here. Please leave, I stated calmly. Ethan's expression darkened at once. He clearly hadn't expected me to respond this way. Don't be ungrateful, Tori, he warned as he stepped forward. The pressure of his alpha presence surged toward me like a wave. As long as you come back with me, I can let bygones be bygones, he added. Let bygones be bygones. I repeated incredulously. It was as though I had heard the funniest joke in the world. I think you've misunderstood something, Ethan Grant. I'm not the one who should be asking for forgiveness. Now please leave. Don't disrupt my business, I retorted. With that, I turned away from them. I walked over to a cabinet and picked up a bundle of dried herbs and a mortar. Then, without sparing them another glance, I began to grind the herbs in silence. Ethan stared at my cold profile from where he was standing. His expression darkened further. This was probably the first time he had ever been rejected so bluntly. Ethan didn't leave. He and Chester checked into a nearby inn. From that day on, my apothecary received 2 regular visitors every day. They never bought anything, just sat silently in the corner the entire afternoon. Ethan still wore his expensive suits. He looked completely out of place perched on a small wooden stool. He no longer ordered me to go home with him. He simply watched me, looking as though he wanted to say something but didn't know how to begin. Chester, on the other hand, sat beside Ethan holding a toy. He would play with it absent-mindedly. Life in this small town continued peacefully, and my daily routine remained unchanged. Like usual, I opened the shop, closed it, gathered herbs and made remedies. The entire time, I treated them as though they were air. This strange routine continued for a week. That was, until one day, when a little girl ran in, proudly holding up a drawing. She often came by the shop to play. Look, Tori, I drew my mommy. She's the one who loves me most in the whole world, the little girl exclaimed proudly. I looked at the beaming woman in the drawing. Then I praised the little girl. It's a beautiful drawing. After seeing the little girl off, I couldn't hold my smile. I couldn't help thinking of Chester's drawing, the one titled My Lovely Family, where he drew me as nothing more than a faceless maid in the background. I felt suffocated, as though a hand had wrapped around my heart and was gripping it tightly. From the corner of the shop, Ethan's expression shifted subtly as something occurred to him. He got up and walked over to me. In a clumsy tone he explained, Tori, that drawing Chester didn't do that on purpose. I looked up and met Ethan's eyes for the first time in a week. I said, oh, and what about Angelina's birthday party? That wasn't on purpose either? What about the kitchen where she burned herself to frame me? You pushed me away without listening to my explanation. I suppose that wasn't on purpose either. Then, what about that time at the school gate? You shoved me to the ground over a bag of snacks, and Chester berated me. Let me guess, that was an accident? You threw me out of your home, and left me to fend for myself alone in that cold, empty house. Was none of that intentional too? Each question I threw at Ethan and Chester was like a knife that stabbed straight into their hearts. The grievances, pain, and despair I had endured over the past 5 years, all of it exploded forth in this one moment. I continued, both of you come here, acting all high and mighty, talking about forgiving me and letting bygones be bygones. On what grounds, Ethan? What right do you have to do that? Do you have any idea how helpless I felt when Angelina was framing me? Do you know how hurt I felt when my own son yelled in my face and called me names? You 2-inch. Don't know a damn thing. All you two care about is your pride and how you feel. I yelled. This was the first time since my rebirth that I vented all my pent-up hurt. Ethan was utterly stunned. Every single thing I had mentioned was a moment he had never given a second thought to. Now that I had spoken them all aloud, he finally realized just how outrageously wrong he had been. For the first time, Ethan didn't know what to say or do. He cleared his throat uncomfortably. His overwhelming alpha presence was gone. Right now, he looked more like a pup who had made a terrible mistake. "I never realized you've been hurting so much," Ethan said. Chester ran over from the corner and tentatively held the corner of my shirt. "I'm sorry, Mommy. I'll do better from now on. Please don't leave me." But their apologies had come too late. I looked at them and then shook my head. "It's too late for apologies. I'm tired, and you two should leave," I stated. With that, I walked into the backyard. I didn't give them another chance. This time, Ethan and Chester didn't try to stop me. I heard the sound of a chair being knocked over in the front room, followed by their departing footsteps. They finally understood that some wounds, once inflicted, could never be undone. Back at the inn, Chester fell asleep quickly. Ethan sat alone in the room. Under the moonlight from the window, his figure cast a lonely shadow. My heart-wrenching words from earlier still echoed in his ears. It was the first time. He felt so utterly defeated and regretful. The pain was more agonizing and harder to bear than when our mate bond was broken. In the silence of the room, Ethan's thoughts drifted uncontrollably back to 6 years ago. Back then, when he was on patrol, he had been ambushed by a rival pack. Heavily injured and separated from his packmates, he had accidentally stumbled into a conflict-free neutral territory. That was where Ethan met me. At the time, I wasn't his quiet and taciturn Luna yet. I was just a she-wolf in plain clothing, gathering herbs in the forest. When I noticed Ethan, I hadn't been alarmed. Instead, I had calmly used herbs to treat his wounds and brought him back to my pack. Ethan still clearly remembered me crouching on the ground to grind herbs. He could also recall the way the sunlight had filtered through the leaves and shone gently on my figure. I looked focused and beautiful. Ethan also remembered the melodious sound of my voice as I explained which plant would stop bleeding, and which flower would soothe the nerves. My eyes had been glowing with confidence and vitality. And he, the proud, untouchable alpha, had been utterly captivated by my unique air. It was he who had set aside all pride and began pursuing me awkwardly. Ethan still recalled making me a flower crown with his own hands. At the time he had vowed to me, "Be my Luna, Tori, and I'll make you the happiest she-wolf in the world." But what happened after that? When did he begin taking everything I gave and did for granted? When did he start resenting the smell of cooking oil on my clothes, and the way I spent her days revolving around him and their son? When did Ethan start frowning at me for not keeping up with fashion trends, and for not wearing makeup, while forgetting entirely that I had given up those things for them? When did he stop caring about what made me me and start demanding that I simply fit the mold of a perfect Luna? And when did he begin to dim the light in my eyes, bit by bit, until it went out completely? The more beautiful the memories, the harsher the reality. Ethan closed his eyes in agony. Only now did he realize what he had lost wasn't just a Luna. He had lost the woman he had once pursued with everything he had. The one who used to shine so brightly that she lit up his whole world. After leaving my shop, Ethan took Chester and returned to his pack that very night. The first order he gave upon arrival was to have Derek bring Angelina to the pack's conference hall. Angelina still had a glimmer of hope on her face when she was brought in. She probably thought Ethan had come to his senses, and was there to take her back. The first thing she asked about was what she cared to know the most. "Alpha Ethan, you're back. Where's Luna, Tori? Did she agree to come back with you?" Ethan didn't reply. He only looked at her with a cold, emotionless gaze. "Tell me, Angelina, did Tori really burn you in the kitchen?" The smile on Angelina's face froze instantly. She swiftly put on a pitiful expression. "Why are you suddenly asking about that, Alpha? Of course she did. Didn't you see the burn mark on my arm that day? I know Tori is the Luna, and I'm just an ordinary she-wolf. It's normal that you would believe her more. But Alpha Ethan, she really did burn me. I'm not lying." Ethan's brows furrowed, but he said nothing further. Instead, he tossed a tablet onto the table in front of Angelina. A video was playing on the screen. It was surveillance footage from the kitchen. The video clearly showed how Angelina dropped her act and maliciously provoked me. Then it showed her grabbing my hand and staging that burn incident herself. The color drained from Angelina's face as she watched her own snarling face in the video. "No, this isn't real," she quibbled incoherently. With a stoic expression, Ethan closed the video and opened another. This time, it was footage from the living room. In the video, Angelina was holding Chester's hand. She seemed to be gently teaching him to draw. She said, "The spot for mommy should be for the person who treats you best, right, Chester? I've been so good to you, so you should draw me there." Upon hearing this, Chester's drawing hand froze in the video. He looked to be thinking over her words. But soon after, he looked up and nodded firmly. "Yeah, Angie is the best to me. I want to paint Angie as my mommy," he exclaimed. Angelina smiled with satisfaction and patted his head. The video finished playing and Ethan's cold gaze returned to Angelina. "How do you plan to explain this?" he questioned. With all the evidence laid out before her, Angelina could no longer deny things and finally broke down. She tried to approach Ethan to explain, but she was blocked by the Gamma warriors standing beside him. "I admit it. I did all of this," she cried. "But I did it all because I love you, Alpha Ethan. I was jealous of Tori. Jealous that she became your Luna without having to do anything. I love you so much that it's almost driving me crazy. That's why I made those mistakes. Can't you see my true feelings at all?" Angelina was trying to use love as an excuse for all her wrongdoings. But this time, Ethan only looked coldly at her. He pierced through her facade with a single sharp statement. "That's not love. It's jealousy." "No, it's love," Angelina screamed, as though someone had hit a nerve. "I did so much for you. I painstakingly learned all your likes and dislikes, and I went out of my way to win over Chester. And what about Tori? What has she ever done for you? She's so cold to you, and she only frustrates you. Everything I did was because I love you. Why can't you understand that?" she shrieked hysterically. Ethan's gaze was filled only with disappointment as he looked at Angelina's jealousy-twisted face. "You don't love me. You love the glamour of being Luna," he heartlessly cut off her rant. "Real love doesn't make you hurt an innocent person, and it certainly doesn't turn you into something this hateful." Angelina was completely defeated by Ethan's words. But even then, she refused to give up, clinging to one last desperate plea. "Tori doesn't deserve to be Luna. I was helping you hold this family together. I was giving Chester the motherly love he deserves," she cried. After hearing the way Angelina was blatantly twisting things, Ethan, for the first time, realized just how deep her obsession ran. He rubbed his temples tiredly. When he spoke, there was a note of self-mockery in his voice. "My biggest mistake was actually trusting you." The words sounded like they were directed at Angelina, but somehow, also to his past self. Then, like an indifferent king, he delivered her final sentence. "From this day forward, you are officially exiled from the pack. You are never to set foot on my territory again," Ethan declared. Angelina collapsed to the ground in disbelief. In the end, the guards dragged her out of the room like a lifeless corpse. Once Angelina was dealt with, the very next thing Ethan did was hand over all pack responsibilities to Derek. "I'll be gone for a while. Until I return, everything here is in your hands," he instructed. Derek was shocked but didn't dare ask questions. He simply accepted the order. After that, Ethan set aside his pride as alpha. With Chester in tow, he quietly returned to the neutral territory where I lived. This time he didn't come knocking. A few days later, I noticed that the shop next door, which had been vacant for as long as I could remember, had started undergoing renovations. I didn't think much of it until a week later, when it officially opened. It was a flower shop. Ethan stood among the blooms, wearing casual clothes and clumsily pruning a rose stem. The moment I saw him, I was completely stunned. After seemingly sensing my gaze, he looked up in my direction. There was a flicker of nervousness and even awkwardness in his expression. There was no trace of the commanding presence he once carried as an alpha. Ethan didn't come over to speak to me. He simply lowered his head and continued struggling with the flowers in silence. Chester, on the other hand, was wearing a tiny work apron. He was holding a little spray bottle and diligently spritzing each pot of flowers. From that day forward, my life had another small surprise. Every morning, when I opened my shop, I would find a fresh bouquet lying at the doorway. Sometimes it was a single rose just about to bloom. Other times, it was a fragrant bundle of lilies. On occasion, the bouquet consisted of a small bunch of vibrantly blooming, colorful wildflowers that I didn't recognize. The bouquets never came with a card, but I knew exactly who sent them. Ethan never set foot in my shop again. He simply chose this wordless way to show he was still there, day after day. I didn't forgive them, but I didn't throw the flowers away either. I placed them in glass vases and set them on the windowsill. Sunlight would stream through the petals, casting scattered shadows across the floor. They added a long-lost touch of warmth and life to this quiet, cold little apothecary. As days passed, my apothecary and the flower shop next door had become a strange little landmark in the neutral territory. As time passed, everyone in the pack discovered that the man who had once been the high and mighty Alpha was now just a clumsy flower shop owner. Ethan's way of pursuing me was silent and stubborn. He seemed to understand that words would be a waste of breath. Thus, the bouquet he left at my door each morning became our only form of interaction. As for me, what started as an annoyance slowly became a habit. I still hadn't forgiven him, but I treated those flowers as nothing more than a small ornament to my new life. Chester had changed the most. He was no longer the spoiled heir he used to be. Instead, he had become Ethan's most diligent little helper. Every day, he carefully watered the flowers and trimmed the stems. Occasionally, he would sneak to the entrance of my shop and ask in a small voice, "Do you need any help, Mommy?" Most of the time, I simply shook my head. And he would walk away, quietly disappointed. Business at my apothecary was better than ever. I focused all my energy on research, curing all sorts of difficult ailments. Gradually, I earned a name for myself within the local pack. Then one day, I received a special customer. A tall man with a calm but commanding presence rushed in. Face was filled with anxiety, and he was holding an unconscious child in his arms. The man's name was Finn Lindell. He was the head gamma. His voice was hoarse with worry as he pleaded with me to save his son. He told me his son had been running a high fever for 3 days, and none of his pack's healers could do anything. I examined the boy's condition, and indeed it was serious. I told Finn to leave the boy with me. Then, I threw myself into my workroom in the back. For a full day and night, I pored over ancient texts and mixed remedies. The light in the flower shop next door stayed on with me through the entire night. The next morning, when I finally stepped out of the apothecary's workroom, I was holding a bowl of warm herbal medicine. Finn was still there. He had been waiting at my door anxiously the entire night, his eyes exhausted and bloodshot. I fed the medicine to the boy. Half an hour later, his fever finally broke, and he slowly opened his eyes. Finn was normally a resolute man, but upon seeing his son awaken, he instantly teared up and thanked me profusely. A few days later, Finn returned to my shop. In a gentle and sincere tone he said, "I came to formally thank you for saving my son, Ms. Dawson." As he spoke, he handed me a beautifully crafted wooden box. "These are some rare herbs that I gathered myself. It's not much, but I hope you'll accept them as a token of thanks." Finn was nothing like Ethan. There was no suffocating alpha presence about him. His gaze was clear, and his smile was warm, like a breeze on a spring day. I didn't turn down his kindness. We started chatting about medicinal herbs, and found ourselves deep in a pleasant conversation. Ethan witnessed all of this from the flower shop next door. He was standing at the window, holding a bouquet of white hyacinths he had just wrapped for me, morning dew still clinging to the petals. Ethan saw me and Finn chatting away happily, and he didn't miss the genuine smile on my face. For a moment, his expression became tense. We were separated by a glass window. Even so, I could clearly feel the gentle, carefully restrained air around him begin to vanish. It was replaced by his unrestrained, domineering alpha presence. Ethan's crimson eyes were currently locked on Finn. He looked as though he wanted to rip Finn to shreds. Ever since Finn appeared, the alpha in the flower shop next door became visibly anxious. The next morning, I opened my shop as usual. But then, I froze in surprise at the sight before me. In addition to the usual bouquet of fresh flowers, there was now a wooden box at the door. It was emitting a faint scent of medicinal herbs. Derek emerged from the side. He respectfully said to me, "Lunatori, these are top-grade medicinal herbs that Alpha Ethan personally selected from our pack. He hopes you'll like them." Upon opening the box, a wave of potent life energy surged out. Inside were all kinds of rare herbs. Some had roots that looked like white pearls, whereas some had leaves that shimmered with a silver glow. Any one of them was enough to make any healer lose their mind with excitement. If we were in the past, I might have been moved by the gesture. But now, I only found it childish. I knew exactly why Ethan had sent these herbs. He hadn't done so out of genuine thoughtfulness, but rather because he had been provoked by Finn's gift from the day before. "Please take these back. My small apothecary has no use for anything so extravagant," I said calmly while shaking my head. Derek wanted to say more, but I had already turned away, unwilling to continue the conversation. Upon seeing my firm stance, he could only take the box and leave. But my rejection didn't seem to dissuade Ethan. Instead, it appeared to have ignited his competitive streak. There was a long-standing problem in the neutral territory that had plagued healers for years. Every spring, a plant in the forest known as silver mist grass would bloom. Its pollen caused severe allergic reactions in most of the pups in the pack. To this day, no permanent cure had ever been found. From a torn page in an old medical manuscript, I discovered a formula that might work. However, several key supporting herbs were still missing. Upon learning about this, Finn returned the very next day with a detailed map of the surrounding forest. While pointing out several marked locations on the map, Finn gently said, "These spots are fairly dangerous, Tori, but the herbs you need can likely only be found there. If you plan to go foraging, please allow me to accompany you to ensure your safety." The assistance Finn offered was always just right. It was both thoughtful and respectful. I accepted his offer. Over the next few days, whenever he had time, Finn would accompany me into the forest to gather herbs. He never said much, just quietly followed behind. He would drive away venomous insects and wild beasts. He also offered me a hand at the right moments whenever I had to climb steep terrain. Today, when we returned with our baskets full, we spotted a familiar little figure standing outside my shop. While holding a lunchbox, Chester stood there with a pitiful expression on his face. The moment he saw Finn behind me, his expression instantly fell. Chester trotted up to me and held out the lunchbox with both hands. "Daddy made this dinner for you, Mommy." I opened the lunchbox. Inside were a few pieces of grilled meat that had been charred almost beyond recognition. There was also a bowl of thick, gooey vegetable soup. Ethan had never set foot in a kitchen. It was probably the first time he had tried cooking for anyone. Chester looked at me, then stole a glance at Finn beside me. In a small voice he added, "Daddy spent a really long time in the kitchen making this." My heart twisted with a tangle of emotions. In the end, I accepted the meal, but it wasn't for Ethan's sake. I accepted it because I didn't want to disappoint Chester. Finn simply gave me a warm smile. Then he quietly turned and walked away. That night, I didn't eat the dinner Ethan made. Instead, I threw myself fully into the development of the new remedy. A month later, I completed the first successful remedy for silver mist grass pollen allergy. The entire pack was thrown into an uproar. The head of the Healer Association came personally to my apothecary and bestowed upon me the title of Chief Healer. As I stood amidst the crowd's praise and gratitude, I gazed at the achievement I had earned with my own two hands. At that moment, I felt a sense of fulfillment unlike anything I had ever known. Instinctively, I looked over at the flower shop next door. Ethan was standing there. He didn't cheer for me like the rest of the pack. He just watched me in silence. His gaze was a complicated mix of emotions. There was surprise, regret, but above all, there was also heartfelt pride and comfort. Perhaps Ethan had finally realized that the bird he had kept in a gilded cage had grown strong enough to soar freely across the skies. The peace of the neutral territory was shattered completely during a crimson twilight. A pack of rogues, coveting the abundance of this land, launched a sudden brutal assault without warning. Alarms echoed through the valley. Finn immediately donned his battle armor and led the pack's warriors to the front line. My apothecary was instantly transformed into an emergency shelter. The heavy scent of blood quickly replaced the fragrance of herbs. I, along with a few assistants, moved swiftly and methodically. We tended to the wounded amid groans and cries of pain. The roars of battle grew closer by the minute. Suddenly, with a deafening crash, the fragile wooden door of the shop was smashed into splinters by a massive rogue. His crimson eyes locked ferociously on the injured, the women and the children. A cruel smile crept across his face. Finn was fighting outside. Entangled with several enemies, he couldn't break free. "Mommy," Chester cried. His little face was pale from fear as he clung tightly to me. I shielded him behind me, watching helplessly as the rogue advanced step by step. At the critical moment, a black figure streaked out like lightning from the flower shop next door and positioned himself in front of me. It was Ethan. He was no longer playing the role of an awkward, casual florist. At this moment, he was exuding the full force of his alpha presence. His crimson eyes burned with uncontainable fury. His presence was so fierce that it seemed to tear through the very air. It wasn't a fight. It was a slaughter. And for the first time, I saw Ethan's true strength. When he ripped out the last enemy's throat with his claws, he finally collapsed. His body fell stiffly to the ground from the severity of his wounds. Once the threat was over, I threw everything I had into saving Ethan. I used every knowledge I had ever learned and every herb I could find. It took 3 full days and nights. But in the end I pulled Ethan back from the edge of death. Once he had recovered, he prepared to leave with Chester. The day before they did, Ethan came to my backyard on a warm, sunlit afternoon. "I'm sorry, Tori," he began. His voice was hoarse, yet unusually calm. After coming back this time, I finally understood what it was I lost back then. When Ethan looked at me, his eyes held a clarity and resignation I had never seen before. Real love isn't about possession. It's about wanting the other person to be happy. After seeing you shine here, I realized that keeping you trapped by my side is the most selfish and foolish thing I've ever done. Tomorrow Chester and I will leave. He needs a father, and my pack still needs an alpha. You're free, Tori." When he said these words, there was a touch of bitterness on his face. But more than that was relief. I listened quietly. Then I looked at him with sincerity. "Your final act of protection allowed me to let go of all the resentment I once held. Thank you, Ethan." I think he finally understood my choice. The next day, Ethan and Chester left. He handed the flower shop next door to a couple in the pack to run. The only thing that remained constant was the bouquet of flowers that still arrived at my door every morning. Finn still remained a good friend. We would occasionally chat over tea. The sun was gentle, and the breeze was mild. I stood in my apothecary, looking at the bouquet of white hyacinths on the windowsill. They glowed softly in the sunlight. And for the first time, I was truly the master of my own life.